One of my most vivid memories of the quilt was when I was flying in for the unfolding. And I remember that my plane flew over the mall and that the entire mall was covered with panels and that the view from the sky made it what it was, this funeral. It was this burial ground of thousands of lives. And I got it at that moment. At that moment, I got Cleve's vision. I got what he was trying to do, which was that it was a personal experience that was affecting all of us. And that laid out in front of us was this story of loss and love and anger and rage and sadness. And as I went from panel to panel, I recognized that each of the people who created those quilt panels did what I did. They put their heart on a sleeve and they sewed something. And there are people who've probably, like me, never sewed in their entire lives, who decided to make something because they love someone. As you may recall, back in the 80s, it was awful. People were dying all the time. And we didn't have the ability to process that much death. And I remember going to a workshop, and the facilitator said, I want you to do something that has stopped you from feeling satisfaction in your life. And I quickly raised my hand and I said, I want to make a quilt to someone that I love dearly. And it was Chicago. It was the winter time. And it was 6:00 at night. And I had no idea. We had 24 hours to do this. There are no fabric stores open. But what is open late at night in Chicago? Of course, Walmart. And so we ran to a Walmart and I said, quick, I need fabric. And the Walmart lady looked at me and said, we don't sell fabric at Walmart. And so we used sheets. They sold these leopard print sheets at Walmart. And about midnight, I get back to my hotel room and I have all these sheets and all of this needle and thread and no idea what to do. I am a queen, but I am not a seamstress. I have never sewed anything in my entire life. And I remember calling up my best friend and saying, Gretchen, it's time to make this quilt, and I don't know what to do. And she said, put me on speakerphone, and we'll stay up all night, and we will sew. And we did. And by 8:00 that morning, I made a quilt. It wasn't the prettiest quilt, but it was a testament of my love. And it helped me to find closure to someone who I needed to say goodbye to. So this was my panel for my best friend named Paul. We grew up together. We came out together. We were part of a group of guys who came of age during the HIV epidemic. We had no idea. We were kids. We were kids who were just trying to understand what it meant to be gay. And we formed this kind of band of comrades who could help each other through the thick and thin. We just didn't understand how thick it would become. And so one of Gretchen's idea was to get people who loved him to write letters. And so we called all of our friends and we had them write letters and we had them fax them. In those days we were fax them to the hotel. And I put the letters inside each of the pieces of fabric with his name so that they could each tell the story of all of our friends and what he had meant to us. Finishing the panel was, I had been sitting on the fact that he had died several years before, and we hadn't made this panel. And so it had been weighing on me, like, how do we mark his death? But at the same time, I didn't want to make this panel because it would have created a finality that up until that moment, I didn't realize how much I needed. And so as we got to putting together this moment, it really was a collection of a group of friends who didn't want to say goodbye, but knew we had to. I've had a lot of friends die of AIDS, but I've only made one panel. And the only reason that I can think of why I've only made the one panel when I've had so many friends die was because this person was really special to me. We were going to be this huge, crazy family. We were going to have a very different life. And he died. And I just don't think I have the energy to do any more panels. When HIV and ACT UP first happened in the 80s, their protest and their die-ins were extraordinary because America hadn't seen it before. Now in a post-Black Lives Matter movement world, it has to play a very different game, as does the HIV epidemic. We have to understand that the world has changed and that how we respond now cannot be the way that we responded back then. And one of the most important things I think we can do is to build coalitions across other movements so that we don't stand alone. So that HIV stands in solidarity with women's rights, so that HIV stands in solidarity with civil rights, with reproductive health, because they're going after all of us. And so what the quilt can do is it can keep the message alive. It could keep hope alive. It could remind our country and our people that there is still much more to fight. It is a different game from what it was before, but it is no less important. Part of where I think the quilt has an obligation and a responsibility is to tell the stories of all the communities who've been impacted by this epidemic. And I love my white gay brothers who started this. And I am extraordinarily grateful for everything that they did. And I don't want to erase them. I definitely do not want to erase them. I just want to make sure that we have the fullness of what this epidemic looks like so that we can talk about the fact that right now in America, if you are a Black gay man, half of Black gay men are going to get HIV in their lifetime. I mean, that is completely unacceptable. And if we're going to talk about kind of all of these things, what we have to understand is that HIV lives in and sits at the intersection of racism, of homophobia, of transphobia, of sexism, that we are the mirror for all of the things that society hates and loves. And that we have to own that. And we have to be proud of that. We have to be proud of our history. I am so proud of the people who came before me because I know that the work that I get to do literally cost their lives. That we're standing on the shoulders of people who died and wanted to tell their stories.